Dahlia woke that morning long before the sun had any real courage to rise, her hands already craving the warmth of dough. She was a pastry chef by trade and by heart, someone who cherished ingredients as though they were precious secrets entrusted to her care. The early hours often whispered recipes into her ear, a dash of nutmeg, a swirl of cocoa, the aroma of rising yeast. But despite the comfort of routine, Dahlia felt a yearning that extended beyond the sugary confections in her bakery's display case. She wondered if there was more to creation than whisking eggs and sugar into silky meringue. A subtle restlessness fluttered inside her, prompting her to look for inspiration in unexpected places. Before she could open the bakery that day, her eyes landed on a flyer taped outside the door. It read, Robotics Fair, explore the future of innovation with a bright depiction of mechanical arms assembling something unknown. Delia's curiosity piqued. She tore down the flyer, folded it into her pocket, and spent the morning portioning butter and sugar for her pastries, her mind swirling with half-formed thoughts of bots and gears. When she finally checked the clock, she realized it was nearly time to open, and a line of hungry customers awaited her. Still, the notion of a new, sparksome mechanical wizardry that could revitalize her creative energies stayed with her all day. If dough could rise, she mused, maybe her sense of wonder could too. The fair was being held in the large tech exposition hall just a few doors down from her bakery, but Dahlia had never once stepped inside. The pale silver building contrasted sharply with the homey warmth of her store, which smelled of vanilla and fresh cream. During her lunch break, she ran over to see if she could slip into a demonstration or two. Posters adorned the walls, drones piloting themselves through obstacle courses, robots with specialized arms for manufacturing, and household prototypes designed to simplify everyday tasks. Dahlia wandered from booth to booth, her green apron still flecked with powdered sugar. She marveled at the feats of technology before her, enthralled by the same sense of possibility she felt when she discovered a new technique in pastry making. She was admiring a sleek robotic arm that was skillfully pouring drinks with each pivot when she heard a calm, steady voice behind her. It uses a series of sensors to detect liquid density, the voice explained. Turning, Dahlia found herself looking into the bright eyes of Everett, an unassuming man with tousled sandy hair and a timid smile. He was in the middle of an explanation, but paused for a moment when he saw the flower on her elbow. There was a gentle amusement on his face, a soft curiosity that mirrored her own. Without skipping a beat, he continued, That way, it never overpours, even with drinks of different viscosities. Neat, right? Dahlia nodded, suddenly aware of how very out of place she appeared, an apron-clad baker in a sea of tech enthusiasts. I'm Dahlia, she ventured, self-conscious yet enthralled by the demonstration. I own the bakery across the street. Well, this is my first time inside this building. I had no idea it was so fascinating. Everett immediately caught onto her interest. You're welcome to explore our booth if you like. I'm a robotics engineer, he said, extending a hand to show her the rest of the displays. Let me walk you through what we have this year. Dahlia accepted the invitation. In the back of her mind, she noted how rare it was for someone to guide her so patiently through any experience not related to pastry making. Most people took a quick look at her flower-streaked apron and assumed she had no head for machines or science. But Everett seemed to recognize in her the same wonder that often accompanied his own tinkering and experiments. Over the course of the fair, Dahlia spent more time than she expected shadowing Everett as he explained motor calibrations, sensor arrays, and the intricacies of programming robots to perform delicate tasks. He told her of his lifelong fascination with innovation, the triumphs of designing a bot arm that could pick a strawberry without crushing it, and even a few comedic mishaps where an accidental slip in code led to robots spinning in circles or speaking in gibberish. With each tale, Dahlia found parallels to her experiences in the kitchen, perfecting the delicate whisk of egg whites, the heartbreak of a cake that collapses in the oven, the humor found in horse-shaped cookies that come out looking more like dogs. Yet, amid this whirlwind of mechanics, code, and steel, a soft pull of connection began to form between them. Dahlia couldn't help noticing the gentle lines that formed at the corners of Everett's eyes when he smiled, or the excited way he leaned forward as he explained something new. She wondered if he also sensed the unspoken energy in the air. Toward the end of the fair, Everett invited Dahlia to his lab space on the second floor of the building. He had a small workshop strewn with half-assembled circuit boards and mechanical parts, illuminated by overhead lamps that gave the room a warm and gentle glow. "I'm working on a new prototype," he said, guiding her toward a table holding the beginnings of what looked like a whimsical metal sculpture. It's a companion bot designed to help with tasks that require a bit of dexterity and a gentle touch. I'm hoping it might one day help with tasks in the kitchen, peeling potatoes carefully or measuring flour precisely. Dahlia ran her fingers delicately across the cool metal surface. "You want robots to help with cooking?" she asked, trying to envision a mechanical arm gently folding chocolate chips into cookie dough. "It's not about replacing the human element," Everett clarified. "It's about supporting it, maybe saving time on mundane tasks so the chef can put more creativity into the dish itself." He let out a small laugh. "But to do that, the bot needs to learn the fundamentals: how to be gentle, how to measure with care, how to appreciate the artistry of it all. That's the part numbers and code can't solve alone. There has to be a certain softness in the creation, right?" Throughout this conversation, Dahlia sensed a deeper resonance. She thought about the nights she spent perfecting recipes in solitude, and how magical it was to share that moment when someone tasted her creation and truly smiled. To imagine a robot that could learn that gentle artistry seemed both intriguing and daunting. She felt her heart warm with possibility. Everett's eyes lit up. "Would you? I'd love a pastry chef's perspective. We can start by letting the bot observe your bakery sometime, if you're comfortable with that. Maybe even help feed some specialized data into its sensor array." They exchanged phone numbers, forging an unspoken commitment to a collaboration that neither had done before. Dahlia left the tech building, her apron pockets filled not just with scribbled instructions about sensors and code, but with hopeful excitement. On her walk back, the early evening air was crisp, and the bakery's lights glowed like a familiar beacon. But now that beacon felt more inviting than routine. It felt invigorating, like a stage for a brand new performance. The very next week, Everett arrived at the bakery with a portable sensor kit. Dahlia had never seen someone so mesmerized by her everyday tasks: measuring flour, kneading dough, piping sugary frosting onto cupcakes. As she piped the last swirl of buttercream, she explained, "Consistency and texture is everything. Too much air and the frosting collapses. Too little and it's dense and heavy." Everett nodded, diligently entering notes into his tablet, occasionally frowning when the sensor readings didn't match his expectations. But Dahlia reassured him that reading pastry dough was as much art as it was science. Over the next hour, she taught him to rely not only on scales and timers, but on the dough's responsiveness under her palms and the subtle change in color at the edges of a batter-laden bowl. When the midday lull arrived, they took a moment to sit at one of the small cafe tables. The overhead bell chimed a lazy tune as a couple of customers ducked inside for a quick chocolate croissant. Dahlia poured them each a cup of tea. "I was thinking," she said, putting down the kettle, "it's nice that you want your robot to support chefs, but what about the personal touch, like adding just a hint of nutmeg because you feel it in your soul that the dish needs it?" She swirled her tea, voice brimming with playful sincerity. "Can a robot learn that level of instinct?" Everett sighed, fingering the edge of his cup. "I don't know. Sometimes I worry I'm chasing something intangible. Robots are amazing at tasks, but they lack intuition. Yet, I still believe that if we can teach them to adapt, to sense subtle cues, and to integrate feedback loops that go beyond numbers, then they can emulate some level of creativity." Dahlia smiled warmly. "I'd love to see how it all turns out. I can't help but imagine a future where a robotic arm helps me knead dough without overworking it, leaving me more time to sculpt sugar flowers or experiment with new flavors. Their conversation meandered from culinary curiosities to broader thoughts on collaboration. Dahlia confessed how she'd once dreamed of traveling abroad to learn techniques from master patissiers, but felt tethered by the demands of her small bakery and financial constraints. Everett spoke of the challenges in the robotics world, especially when trying to secure funding for projects that deviated from the standard corporate lines. They found in each other an audience that listened without judgment, someone who understood that passion often demanded leaps of faith. Over the following weeks, the robot prototype took shape. Sometimes Everett would bring it to the bakery, letting it watch Dahlia's movements with cameras embedded in its head like assembly. Other times, Dahlia would slip away to his lab with Tupperware containers full of experimental pastries, so they could calibrate sensors to detect different textures in fresh breads, pastries, and fillings. Their time together became frequent enough that each recognized the small daily nuances in the other's life. Dahlia's frustration when the morning's dough didn't rise quite right. Everett's excitement when the robot finally managed to pick up an egg without cracking it. Outside of work, they began sharing casual moments. One evening, Everett invited Dahlia for a quiet walk by the river. They ambled along, discussing the intersection of technology and food, their voices mingling with the gentle lapping of water against the embankment. The warm glow of street lamps illuminated Dahlia's features in a gentle light, and Everett realized he was no longer just intrigued by her baking expertise. Every time she reflected on the flavors of a new recipe or offered him a taste of something that danced with sugar and spice, he felt a pull. Past the metal and code of his life, he found something sweet, something that comforted and challenged him in equal measure. For Dahlia, each day she spent with Everett unlocked new perspectives. She learned to see the world in terms of inventive solutions, realized how often she'd let the daily routine stifle her creativity. With Everett, she discovered a spark of daring that felt equal parts electrifying and comforting. Neither of them rushed to label what they were feeling. It was a slow, humming energy resembling the gentle knead of bread dough that gradually rose into something substantial. One evening, as they were packing up the robot prototype in the bakery, Dahlia admitted to Everett something that had weighed on her mind. Sometimes I want to make the bakery bigger, expand my menu to new experimental pastries, but then I get nervous. What if nobody likes these new creations? What if I fail? It's safer just to stick to the same old chocolate croissants and vanilla custards that everyone expects. Everett listened, then gently placed a hand over hers, still dusted in a bit of flour. Playing it safe may be comfortable, but it also keeps us from discovering our full potential. Look at how many times I've messed up with this robot so far, but each failure teaches me something crucial. Without the risk, we don't get the reward. She glanced at him, noticing how the faint overhead lights highlighted his earnestness. I guess you're right, she murmured, her voice soft. Sometimes we just need that extra push. A thoughtful silence stretched between them. Then Everett cleared his throat. In that spirit, I've been working on a new subroutine I wanted to show you. It's basically an AI-driven taste sensor that tries to interpret the sweet spot in your recipes. He gestured to the robotics kit. But I need your help perfecting it. Curiosity danced in Dahlia's eyes. How does that work? Everett explained that the sensor was designed to pick up on certain ratios of sugar to other ingredients, trying to replicate a sense of balance on a chemical level. The problem was that taste wasn't purely chemical, it was also emotional. Dahlia found herself offering suggestions. Maybe they could incorporate a feedback loop that measured user reactions, like how people's eyes lit up or the subtle posture shifts they displayed when they tasted something truly delightful. They brainstormed, each idea bouncing off the other like a lively conversation between close friends. By the time they concluded that night's session, the air felt charged with creative energy. Dahlia hardly noticed how close they stood until she turned to put away a spatula. and found Everett's face only inches from hers. There was a moment, a breath, when the rest of the world faded into the background. His gaze lingered on her lips before meeting her eyes. Time seemed to stretch like sugar being pulled into spun candy. Dahlia's cheeks warmed and she cleared her throat, offering him a hopeful smile. Neither said a word about that moment, yet they both carried it home like a secret treasure. A few days later, Beulah decided to test her newfound courage. She created a pastry that fused traditional French technique with a surprising twist, an infusion of cardamom and citrus in a custard filling, topped with a sprinkling of crystallized rosemary. Placing them in a display case, she felt a rush of nerves. This was a bold departure from her usual offerings. What if customers turned up their noses? The morning felt tense until Everett walked in, as though summoned by her jitters. He looked more casual than usual, wearing a sweatshirt smudged with machine oil from the lab. "Morning," she greeted, forcing a bright tone. "I have something new if you want to try." He picked up one of her experimental pastries. "It looks exquisite," he said, noticing the glint of sugar crystals. A moment later, he took a bite. Dahlia watched carefully, searching for any hint of dissatisfaction in his expression. Then Everett's eyes lit up and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "This is remarkable. It's unexpected, but it works. You can taste how the flavors build on each other in layers." Warmth flooded Dahlia's heart. Encouraged, she openly displayed the new pastries, offering samples to curious customers. Some were hesitant, but many returned with wide eyes, praising the complexity of the flavors. By midday, she'd almost sold out. The excitement lingered in her chest like a happy spark. When Everett finally placed the empty sampler tray on the counter, his own posture radiated pride for her achievement. "Congratulations," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. That evening, Dahlia invited Everett to a private celebration in the bakery's kitchen after closing. She prepared a small feast of sweet and savory pastries, a spread of cheeses, fresh fruit, and of course, her newly minted signature treat. And while she'd set the table with warm candlelight and a vase of fresh lilacs, she realized the real celebration was simply sharing this moment with him. He arrived with a bouquet of tiny orange blossoms, flowers he knew symbolized zest and enthusiasm, an homage to her bold new creation. The simple gift touched Dahlia's heart more than words could say. They ate at a corner table, a comfortable hush letting them savor the food. Then, as if guided by an invisible cue, they stood and began clearing the plates together. Their conversation drifted to childhood memories, how Dahlia had learned to bake from her grandmother, how Everett had dismantled his sister's music box just to see how it worked. "Did you manage to put it back together?" Dahlia teased, her tone laced with playful suspicion. "Eventually, yes," Everett laughed. "But I got grounded for a week because I lost one of the tiny gears under the sofa." Dahlia giggled, picturing a young Everett rummaging under furniture in a quest to restore the music box. The image stirred something tender in her. In a moment of sudden boldness, she took a step closer, flour-dusted fingers still holding a dish towel. The candlelight flickered across Everett's eyes, illuminating the question that hung in the air, one that had lingered between them for weeks. Slowly, carefully, Dahlia set the towel aside and pressed closer, heart hammering in her chest. Time seemed to still again, that same hush from before returning, but now laden with intent. Everett gently wiped a smudge of chocolate from her cheek, and his hand lingered at her jawline. She drew in a shaky breath and closed the distance between them. Their lips brushed softly, sweet as the spun sugar that daily graced her confections. The kiss felt like a culmination of all their creative energy, all their quiet hopes, an exhale of relief and longing finally realized. When the moment passed, they stood smiling, hearts in a gentle flutter. They returned to the dishes with smiles that wouldn't fade, aware that something had shifted irrevocably. Their partnership was no longer just about robots and recipes. It was an unspoken promise, a sense of belonging that transcended the boundaries they once thought separated them. In the weeks that followed, Dahlia and Everett refined the robot's taste sensor together. They integrated a camera capable of reading facial cues, capturing micro expressions that hinted at delight or displeasure. Everett coded an adaptive response so the robot could subtly alter a recipe based on repeated patterns of positive or negative reactions. Dahlia, in turn, challenged its mechanical arm's dexterity with tasks like whisking meringue to a precise stiffness and carefully folding it into cake batter. Every success felt like a shared triumph, every glitch an excuse to lean over the lab table side by side as they tried to spot the error in code or hardware. Eventually, they decided to hold a small demonstration at the bakery for a handful of local food bloggers and tech enthusiasts. The goal was to showcase how the synergy of culinary artistry and robotics innovation could achieve something extraordinary. The group watched, enraptured, as the robot gently sifted flour, measured out sugar with exacting precision, and folded in whipped cream to create a delicate mousse. Dahlia guided the process, while Everett pointed out how the robot adapted its techniques based on real time feedback. The result was a dessert so flawlessly airy and richly flavored that even the toughest critics bit into it with a measure of awe. A round of cheers followed, cameras flashed, and all eyes turned to Dahlia and Everett, quietly acknowledging that this collaboration had softened the borders between two seemingly disparate worlds. Dahlia felt the glow of pride, not just in her craft, but in the companionship that fueled her newfound boldness. Everett, equally proud, gazed at her with a mixture of humility and admiration. In that moment, Dahlia saw their connection reflected in the shimmer of the mousse's surface, as tangible as any ingredient in a recipe for something truly extraordinary. The demonstration concluded, and the guests trickled out with excited chatter. Dahlia and Everett found themselves alone in the bakery once more, the robot quietly powering down in the corner. They both inhaled, letting the sweet scent of success flood their senses. Then, with a chuckle, Dahlia remembered a quotation she'd read somewhere. Innovation is as much a matter of perspective as it is of skill. She whispered it to Everett, who nodded, adding, and love is just as much about taking chances as it is about any perfect formula. They shared a lingering look, a silent promise that their story was still unfolding. Together, they had crafted something new and magical, proving that technology and creativity, logic and sweetness could meld in perfect harmony. And in that harmonious blending, they discovered a place where passion, warmth, and heart thrived. A recipe for something more than just a successful pastry or a cutting edge invention. It was a recipe for a love born in the swirl of sugar and circuits, one that, much like the finest dough, needed patient tending before it rose into something truly remarkable.